Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the team selection for Gameweek 31. We have an extremely quick turnaround, and also you see your fantasy to contend with over the next couple of days, and it will all be covered on this channel. There's going to be many videos and live streams headed your way, and this team selection will conclude the coverage for Gameweek 31. We recently got the announcement of double Gameweek 33 and blank Gameweek 34, which was as expected. So if you have seen my previous videos, you have a good idea of how both Gameweeks will be looking like, and also some key injury updates have already come about in the Friday press conferences about Justin Kluivert and Alexander Isak. Both of them will be covered in this video. The same goes for my performance in Gameweek 30 as I activate the wildcard, and it might have been a week too early in the end, and I'll discuss my plans for the bench boost in Gameweek 32 and also how I'm tackling the rest of the season with my other chips available, which is basically just a free hit. Smash the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel. Our aim is to get this to a 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 33,000 subscribers. Check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. And the same goes for the FPL Challenge League, which you can see on screen. This week it is called Park the Bus, and it's about having 2 goalkeepers and 5 defenders with an unlimited budget. And I've gone all in on Newcastle, but Kieran Trippier remains doubtful, which I'll also cover very soon. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. In recent live streams, I have been asked about double Gameweek 33 and which teams are doubling. So the answer is Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, and Manchester City. All of them will blank in Gameweek 34, but their Gameweek 33 fixtures include Ipswich Town away and Crystal Palace at home for Arsenal. Aston Villa will face Newcastle at home and Manchester City away. Crystal Palace will face Bournemouth at home and Arsenal away. And then Manchester City have Everton away and Aston Villa at home. And for blank Gameweek 34, these are the confirmed fixtures of Chelsea versus Everton, Brighton against West Ham, Newcastle versus Ipswich Town, Southampton versus Fulham, Wolves versus Leicester, Bournemouth against Manchester United, Liverpool versus Spurs, and Nottingham Forest versus Brentford has remained in Gameweek 34, despite the fact that Nottingham Forest have reached the FA Cup semi-finals. All the other semi-finalists of that competition will blank in 34 and double in Gameweek 33. So as you can see there, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Man City, just to be clear, are blanking in 34 and doubling in Gameweek 33. So in terms of key injury updates, Gabriel Magalhaes was covered in my Transfers podcast yesterday, and Arsenal confirmed that he's going to miss the rest of the season and he will have surgery to deal with a hamstring problem. That's, I think, the 4th hamstring issue Arsenal have had this season, so hopefully he recovers very soon. But that is a massive blow, not just to the Gunners, but also our FPL teams, and those who still have the wildcard in their back pocket can easily get rid of Gabriel for the likes of Saliba or Timber as an Arsenal replacement like for like. But otherwise, I'd be considering Gavardio if you're still in the market for a premium defender, not to mention those Newcastle assets in that defensive line like Livramento, Kieran Trippier if he's fit, and Dan Burn. That's what I'd be prioritising right now, and a lot depends on when you're looking to bench boost. So if you are aiming for Gameweek 32, then I would consider a Brighton defensive asset like Estupiñán. Otherwise, for Gameweek 33, you should be looking at West Ham with Areola in goal. If not, you could be going for Wan-Bissaka or another option along those lines. But in terms of the updates we got today, and by the way, this is the fixture schedule according to Ben Crellin, feel free to pause at any stage. This is what Isak and Trippier are looking like at the moment according to Eddie Howe. So he said the following: we'll wait and see today. I will see them, Trippier and Isak, for the first time today. We don't think we have any big injuries from Wednesday night, but we have a few niggles. We are monitoring Anthony Gordon. He is still recovering. He has done individual training, not group training. We will have to wait and see. But Eddie Howe usually doesn't give much away in his press conferences. But Areola once again kind of casting doubts about Justin Kluivert, and he said it's difficult for him to return this weekend. So he said the following: Justin is going to be difficult. I wouldn't say it's a definitely not. We'll see today if he can train with us and help us from the bench at least, but he feels tight, so it's difficult. And the other day, Areola said that Kluivert doesn't have a serious injury. It's more about fatigue and overload. So they are managing that issue, but that is another problem for our FPL squads. And one of the mistakes I made on the wildcard was keeping Justin Kluivert. There is a quick turnaround between Gameweek 30 and 31, so for him to miss that Ipswich Town game didn't bode well for the upcoming deadline, and he is currently orange flagged as things stand. So those are the key updates in terms of those really important FPL assets like Trippier, Isak, Gordon, and Justin Kluivert, and expect more of them to be provided in my deadline stream tomorrow. But let's now head over to the graphics and also my Gameweek review for Gameweek 30, and then also discuss my transfer plans for the upcoming deadline. I've only got one free transfer. I just used the wildcard, and with 2 chips remaining, the free hit and the bench boost, things are kind of set in stone in terms of when I'm going to use both of those chips, but I need to be very careful with how I maneuver these transfers, because otherwise I could start taking hits fairly soon. The wildcard is a long-term tool, but you always want to hit the ground running with this chip, and it was quite mixed bag for me, as you'll see in this section. Now, between the sticks, I did have that kind of heartbreak in the 94th minute as Rodrigo Muniz wiped out that Arsenal clean sheet, so David Raya only produced 2 points, and I did sell Sells on the wildcard, who delivered 8 points overall in a 1-0 victory over Manchester United. But luckily enough, I did have that Forest defensive coverage in my starting lineup. I started Milenkovic over Gabriel, so that's one of the few good things I did in terms of my team selection and kind of decisions going into this deadline. But I always wanted that Forest defensive coverage, whether it's Sells or Milenkovic, and Munoz was very disappointing. Crystal Palace set that record of 6 consecutive clean sheets on their travels, and obviously winning all of those games across all competitions, but they couldn't make it 7 against Southampton. They went behind and ended up settling for a 1-1 draw, and Gavardio kept a clean sheet against Leicester. That was fairly standard, and I was very confident of Man City being able to keep one, which is something I've rarely been able to say this season. So overall, it was a decent showing from my defensive line, but Raya and Munoz were extremely disappointing, and I didn't just sell Sells on the wildcard, but also Levi Colwill, who kept a clean sheet on Thursday night against Tottenham Hotspur in another 1-0 victory. With my midfield, it was also fairly decent, but Salah and Ismaila Sarr both blanked. But Jacob Murphy came off the bench to replace Justin Kluivert, and he got an assist, but he also lost out on some bonus points. He was on course for 7 points overall at one stage, but I'll still be quite happy with that 5-pointer. And Cole Palmer got booked. He was also on course for a very good return. In fact, he was going to match Bukayo Saka with an 8-pointer, but in the end, it was 6 overall. He got a bonus point, but the yellow card removed one of them, and of course, you get a -1 for a booking anyway. And to complete this starting 11, Mateta, Isak and Marmoush, the best front three you can build in my opinion right now, especially with Erling Haaland out for the next 5 to 7 weeks. Marmoush got the goal and also 9 points overall against Leicester. Alexander Isak also scored and got some bonus points against Brentford, but now he is a doubt going into that Leicester game, and maybe his minutes will be managed against one of the worst sides in the Premier League. And Mateta was subbed off at the 59th minute mark, which is always so frustrating. He was a couple of seconds away from at least getting another appearance point. So that has been slightly disappointing so far, but he just came off the back of that facial injury against Millwall Town, where he had that obviously horrendous kick to the head. But I think Mateta can do really well over the coming weeks. But as I mentioned in my recent podcast, I think he could potentially be benched in one of those double Gameweek fixtures, and I'm looking at Arsenal away in Gameweek 33, just a couple of days before the FA Cup semi-final, and that could be a slight concern there, but I still rank him higher than most forwards in the game. But arguably Isak and Marmoush from now until the end of the season are even better. But if you're buying a striker at this moment in time with back-to-back double games for Crystal Palace, you're still going to be very keen on going for Jean-Philippe Mateta. Now, my bench doesn't look that great, and that's not something that's too concerning right now, but I'm looking to bench boost very soon, and my current plan is Gameweek 32. That is kind of what I've got penciled in at the moment, because the likes of Areola and Bowen, for example, and Wan-Bissaka, they would be appealing for Gameweek 33, and I bought none of them on my wildcard because they face Liverpool away in Gameweek 32. But Verbruggen conceded 3 goals against Aston Villa and delivered 1 point overall. Justin Kluivert missed out completely, and he is a major doubt for Gameweek 31 as well. He does face Fulham at home in Gameweek 32, so I don't mind keeping him for that stage, but will he be fit enough to get 70-80 minutes by that point and also get a good return? That's something that remains to be seen. And obviously Gabriel only got a 1-pointer and is now out for the rest of the season. That needs to be dealt with, but maybe not this week necessarily. And Livramento got 2 points. He blanked against Brentford, but he's fairly nailed on from now until the end of the season. And my kind of reasoning for going for him over Trippier is that he's 1 million cheaper, and he also has a better injury record, as Trippier has dealt with a lot of problems over the last year. So that was my Gameweek 30 review. You can see the points and rank on the right hand side. I got a very small green arrow to 257k, so I'll take it. But having said that, I would have scored even more points on the non-wildcard team with the likes of Vanussen and Mbumo both scoring and delivering 8-pointers. I think in those few minutes where both of them scored those goals, that kind of switched things a little bit and made the wildcard look worse in terms of immediate impact compared to how it was looking like at the beginning of the week. And of course, Sells and Colwill did extremely well too. So in the end, my wildcard squad has been outscored by my original team, despite having the likes of Mikolenko and Robinson potentially featuring in my final 11 if I didn't play the wildcard chip in Game Week 30. And it's always good to reflect and learn from some mistakes, but sometimes it's important not to have too many regrets. And if I had wildcard in Game Week 31, that would have looked even stronger. I could have gone off Gabriel and found a replacement immediately and bolstered my Game Week 32 bench boost, or potentially by that stage I would have decided, you know what, I want a bench boost in Game Week 33 instead, and I could tweak a few things to my liking. But it's all set in stone. I will bench boost in Game Week 32 and free hit in Game Week 34 unless I get a major disaster in terms of injuries over the next week and I have to basically delay the bench boost by another week or two at the very least. But I definitely won't be bench boosting in Game Week 34, I can tell you that now. With the prices though, I have suffered a drop very recently. So my squad value is currently 103.1 million and I've got 0.3 million in the bank. And it was Justin Kluivert who went down in price overnight to 6.3, actually 6.2 million, should I say. And apart from that, I gained a lot of value by playing the wildcard a couple of days ago. That's a good thing about it. But I also played the chip relatively late because it was during the deadline stream a couple of minutes before the deadline was locked. So I also missed out on a few other price changes that happened over the weekend, but it is what it is. I have obviously made my bed and this is my current squad going into Game Week 31, and not much has really changed in the grand scheme of things in terms of my plans for the rest of the season. And I've always had a good idea of when I want to use the chips. So now it's about using them and trying to get as many green arrows as possible. So let's talk about some transfer plans over the next couple of weeks, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'll make them in Game Week 31. Gabriel to Saliba is a like-for-like replacement, very solid and safe. Arsenal face Brentford at home in Game Week 32, where I'm looking to bench boost. And in Game Week 33, they've got a double of Ipswich Town away and Crystal Palace at home. So for those two specific game weeks, Arsenal look very appealing. But with no Gabriel, I'm also not as convinced about them as I would have been a couple of days ago before that injury even happened. So hopefully Gabriel does recover very soon. And for next season, he's in great shape. But he won't play a part once again in this campaign, which is a huge shame for the Gunners. And I do think Kivio could be a nice entry point, as I mentioned before. Otherwise, 8 Nuri for those that have no free hit and really want to target blank Game Week 34 with Wolves facing Leicester at home on that particular occasion. And once again, Wan-Bissaka, West Ham defenders for Game Week 33 look very appealing, and perhaps going for other double Game Week assets, even from Aston Villa potentially. But I think rotation could be rife with the villains there, and they will prioritise the FA Cup semi-final and also the Champions League tie against Paris Saint-Germain. So I don't think many defenders stand out in terms of Gabriel replacements. The vast majority of those that I'd really be looking at are in my setup already, like Milenkovic, Gvardiol, Livramento, and also Daniel Munoz. So having that fifth defender is kind of difficult at the moment. Saliba is the safest bet, and I could see myself making this transfer in Game Week 32, but not necessarily this week. As for my other transfer that I'm considering, Justin Kluivert out for Morgan Rogers, who faces Southampton away in Game Week 32, then doubles in 33. That is looking more likely at the moment, but I'll be honest, if it wasn't for this Kluivert injury, I'd still rather have him than Morgan Rogers from now until the end of the season. But that was a mistake of mine, I think, in terms of keeping Kluivert on the wild card. But even if he does feature against West Ham off the bench, I'm still fairly confident that he would start against Fulham as a result, and I'd be happy to keep him. He would no longer be a priority sell. But Morgan Rogers faces Southampton away and then doubles in Game Week 33. So buying him in Game Week 32 is still on the agenda, and a lot depends on Kluivert's fitness, but it's only an overload and fatigue issue. It's nothing serious, and that's why Kluivert was kept in the first place. So maybe I've been a bit unfortunate in that regard, but with that quick turnaround and also the yellow flag going into the Game Week 30 deadline, it was always a huge risk to keep him with this chip. So with all of that in mind, this is my provisional Game Week 31 team selection, and I could end up making no moves, but ultimately transfers will be made in time for Game Week 32 and 33. David Raya will start between the sticks against Everton away. My alternative Verbruggen does face Crystal Palace away from home, and with multiple Crystal Palace assets in my squad, it makes a lot of sense to kind of just go in with Arsenal, who do have the better defence as well. But the Gunners also look very shaky against Fulham, and without Gabriel, I think they could struggle in these Premier League games coming up, and I think the likes of Kivio could make some big mistakes which lead to goals conceded, or at least chances conceded. But let's see what David Raya can do. And with my defensive line, there is that temptation to buy Saliba now, but I think Everton could score at Goodison Park here, and I'm quite happy to start one of Gvardiol or Milenkovic if needed. Both of them have away fixtures, just like Livramento, but I think with Gvardiol, he's got more attacking threat against Manchester United, and Daniel Munoz does have a home game, but it is against Brighton, and I do expect Crystal Palace to concede here as well. So actually, my hopes are on Livramento and Newcastle in terms of keeping a clean sheet against Leicester away, and I think this week, I certainly wouldn't mind doubling up on that Newcastle defence and then having Alexander Isak up front. But there are also some good midfielders like Harvey Barnes this week as a one-week punt. That could really look very enticing. Jacob Murphy got 13 points against Leicester in the reverse fixture, and Anthony Gordon looks very appealing for double game week 32, but based on the quotes I showed you earlier from Eddie Howe, it does look like Anthony Gordon could be benched here against Leicester away. With my midfield though, it does look fairly solid with Sarr, Palmer, Murphy and Salah. It's quite standard and template on the wildcard, you could say, and Kluivert remains my fifth midfielder. He is on the bench currently, and even if I were to buy in Morgan Rogers this week, I think he'd also be on the bench there, facing Nottingham Forest at home. But Ismaila Sarr scored a brace against Brighton in the reverse fixture, so I'm actually hoping for him to do very well, and he is ranked quite highly in my captaincy list, which you'll see in the deadline stream tomorrow. Cole Palmer is also right up there facing Brentford away, and he played very well against Tottenham. The booking was just a big shame, and in terms of goals, he has really been struggling from that department for the last couple of months, but I think he could score here against Brentford and Ipswich Town coming up next, and he could be sold for Saka in Gameweek 33. And in an ideal world, you'd have Salah, Palmer and Saka in your midfield, and then you keep one of these budget midfielders like Murphy or Sarr, or perhaps both of them if you're happy to keep them for the long term. But I do think Murphy could be a very underrated shout here against Leicester for the captaincy. I know it's not something you typically do, and Murphy does have that high ceiling and he can be fairly inconsistent, but for his price tag, he is one of the best midfielders in Fantasy Premier League, and I think he could be a very good option in that midfield. As for Salah facing Fulham away, he is fixture proof. He did miss a big chance against Everton and it wasn't his best performance, but Salah has been by far the best FPL asset this season. He's got the underlying numbers, and Fulham look very shaky defensively against Arsenal despite sitting back and trying to have that low block. Arsenal struggled in the first half but then unlocked them on multiple occasions in the second, and they created multiple big chances, which is something they've rarely done this season. I think the Gunners have struggled for creativity and goal scoring throughout this entire Premier League campaign. But to complete the starting 11, I've got a template front three of Isak, Mateta and Marmoush, and if Isak can start against Leicester, he is probably the best captaincy option, even over Salah, which is something I've rarely said this season. I think Marmoush is fairly underrated in terms of captaining this week, and he's no longer a rotation risk like he was when Erling Haaland was still about, but the likes of Foden and Savinho will still be heavy rotation risks. I would probably avoid all Man City midfielders in the long term, but Marmoush up front is just a safe and secure option until Erling Haaland returns from injury, and I think Mateta can start scoring fairly soon and getting over that injury sustained against Millwall in the FA Cup a couple of weeks ago. As for my bench, it's not looking great and I need to bolster it in time for double game week 32. But I've got Verbruggen away to Crystal Palace, Justin Kluivert away to West Ham, also Milenkovic facing Aston Villa away, and of course Gabriel is out for this season. It would have been Everton away, and he would have started over Gvardiol if he was fit, and that would have probably meant a double up in the Arsenal defence. I think I still would have gone for Raya over Verbruggen if that was the case, but ultimately I need to sort out that Gabriel issue as soon as possible. That is the biggest priority, and hopefully the likes of Isak and Kluivert are available just in time for double game week 32. And with the captaincy, I am looking at Alexander Isak, but there is the possibility he doesn't start against Leicester, and if we get any kind of tidbits or news before the deadline, I will cover that in my deadline stream, and I will make a decision to switch the armband to a Mohamed Salah. But I'm also open to captaining Cole Palmer, Jacob Murphy, Marmoush, and possibly Ismaila Sarr. That is still under consideration. Mateta's another decent shout, but I think Salah will be the safest bet. And if I want to go left field, Jacob Murphy could actually end up being my captain. So we'll see how things turn out. But ideally, it would be Alexander Isak against Leicester away. They have been absolutely shambolic under Ruud van Nistelrooy. Now, with expected points, Fantasy Football Hub are very bullish on Mohamed Salah. He has a 7.4 points figure, and Isak is at 5.4. I do think it would be significantly higher if it wasn't for the yellow flag. David Raya has 4.9, which I think is a bit too high. I'm not as confident in an Arsenal clean sheet as these algorithms are. I've got Munoz, Gvardiol and Livramento with decent numbers as well, but Livramento has the lowest, and he's the one I'm most confident in terms of keeping a clean sheet in Gameweek 31. Sa has 5.3, and I was looking at starting Justin Kluivert, but when I saw that Areola press conference update on Friday morning, that's when I decided to make that switch, and Ismaila Sarr will likely be in my final starting 11, unless I see news that Justin Kluivert is going to start. Then I might tweak things a little bit, but that also remains in question. I've also got Palmer, Murphy and Salah with very good numbers, of course. Murphy at 4.5 seems a little bit too low in my opinion, and he could easily get double that amount against Leicester away. And then you've got Mateta and Marmoush, who also have around 5. I do think Marmoush is a little bit underrated, and he is the main striker and attacker for Man City now, which is still very enticing despite the poor season they are having. Verbruggen, Kluivert, Milenkovic and Gabriel all have very low numbers. Of course, Gabriel is at 0 now, but Milenkovic and Kluivert are still decent options, and hopefully there aren't any more issues in terms of injuries and suspensions going into double Gameweek 32. And that's what I'm going to show you in this next segment in terms of FPL.team, a great website where you can visualize future game weeks. And if all goes well, my bench boost in double Gameweek 32 looks very strong. By rolling the transfer this week, I would have 2 free transfers going into double Gameweek 32, which is nothing spectacular, but it could be enough to save my bench boost. I would have Raya and Verbruggen at home to Brentford and Leicester respectively. Munoz, Sarr and Mateta with double game weeks against Man City and Newcastle away. The same goes for Livramento, Murphy and Isak, who have 2 home games against Man United and Crystal Palace. Both Gavardio and Marmoush face Crystal Palace at home. Salah faces West Ham, also at home. Cole Palmer, another plum fixture facing Ipswich Town at Stamford Bridge. And I've got Justin Kluivert at home to Fulham. Saliba would replace Gabriel in this case, but that could also change. And Milenkovic at home to Everton. But if needed, and Justin Kluivert is still a doubt going into Gameweek 32, I could sell him to Morgan Rogers, who faces Southampton away. And that also helps me for double Gameweek 33, where I could also start him facing Newcastle at home and Man City away, and the bench would look like Verbruggen, Murphy, Milenkovic and Livramento. And in terms of fixtures, that looks much weaker than Gameweek 32, and that's the way I've built my wildcard, of course, in the previous deadline. So I'm looking quite strong for Gameweeks 32 and 33 on paper, assuming we get no more suspensions or injuries, which you can't really do in Fantasy Premier League. And I've got the free hit to use in blank Gameweek 34, because otherwise I will need to take hits and make multiple transfers, despite the fact that Milenkovic has a confirmed fixture in Gameweek 34, which we discussed in my recent podcasts and live streams. It doesn't look that great there, but I can easily buy the likes of Cunha, Aït-Nouri, and really target these plum fixtures. I've already got that triple up in Newcastle, which is fairly decent. I've got Verbruggen and Murphy, so it's not the worst in the world, but I just don't really see myself using the free hit in any other game week than 34. It just makes a lot of sense for my squad, and ultimately going from Palmer to Saka in back-to-back weeks doesn't really make too much sense to me. So the free hit is best deployed in blank Gameweek 34. With my situation, it will be different for everybody watching, and when you wildcard and how you're looking to bench boost, whether it's in 32 or 33, also has a major impact. I would probably captain Salah or Isak in that particular game week, but of course, Gameweek 31 is what I'm fully focused on right now, and then optimize my bench boost in Gameweek 32. The free hit can always bail me out of 34 anyways, but it's good to have a decent idea of future game weeks as well. And I've got a solid platform from Gameweek 35 until the end of the season, with another blank in 37 with the FA Cup finalists and the respective opponents, and another potential double in Gameweek 36 as well, which will be covered on this channel. Everything you need to know for FPL and UCL Fantasy is right here. That concludes the FPL team selection for Gameweek 31 with an extremely quick turnaround, and the same goes for UCL Fantasy with another deadline on Tuesday. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you on Tuesday for a UCL Fantasy deadline stream, and also tomorrow for FPL.